This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewald, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Maura.
Hello,
Hi,
Charlie.
Hi, Maura. Why, it's campaign season.
It is? I thought that ended.
It seems like, yes, we think it goes away and it comes right back again.
It never really ends.
So here we have an interesting situation in Pennsylvania. We have a lieutenant governor who's running for the Senate, and he just had a stroke.
Yes.
And had a brain aneurysm removed, and then we have a world-famous doctor running on the other ticket.
Yes,
so when they go around, they can take care of each other. Is that good or what?
It's ideal.
It is ideal.
It's probably never going to happen again in the history of campaigning.
Probably not. Probably not. Well, we also have to be paying attention to it's already back to school time. Can you believe that?
No.
I can't believe how fast the time goes. But in order to talk about higher education, we're very fortunate to have back with us again Ken Mash, the president of APSCUF, of course, the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculty. Ken, welcome back.
Thank you, Charlie. More. It's good
nice
to see
have
you.
Yeah, it's great.
You have been served as the president of APSCUF in the past, and now you're back for another stint.
6 years the first time, and we'll see what happens this time.
Congratulations, and I'm sure the folks at APSCUF are very happy to have you back. And with you, you've brought, why don't you introduce your guest, would you please?
Madison Johnson, who is a senior at Shippensburg University. She's interning with APSCUF at this right now. She's finishing up, but Maddie brings with her some experience as a student at our universities and can talk a little bit about the impact of the cost of going to college.
Okay, well, we'd like to talk to you about higher education as we head into this fall season and the campaign season. Of course, the most obvious question, Ken, is how did the state system fare in this Pennsylvania budget?
Well, we actually did very well, relatively speaking. So we got an increase of $75 million. I think that's 15.7% increase, which is a sizable increase. I know the system is happy, the chancellor is happy, the board of governors is happy that that's money coming back to the system. And, we really were desperate to get additional funds. And this, we, the faculty, are very happy to get the money, but we also just understand we have to keep things in perspective. So, we had a cut of 18% under Governor Corbett.
Yeah.
This is back years ago. 12 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So with this money, it gets us above the dollar amount of where we were, before the cut. But when you start taking into account inflation and everything, we're well beyond, behind where we have been. And Pennsylvania still is going to wind up ranking pretty low as far as state support for higher education.
How is this going to affect the affordability for students?
Well, I can turn it over to Maddie.
Tell us. Do you know what the impact that this budget is going to have for students?
I think it's kind of hard to tell right now. We haven't really seen the cost go down yet. I'm still having to pay $26,000 academic year, which is still extremely high and not much lower than a private school in this area. So I think it's hard to tell. We may have to wait it out for a couple years.
Was affordability one of the biggest factors in your determination on where you were going to go to college?
Absolutely. I couldn't afford going to a private school, and I felt that I should be able to invest in my future and in my education at an affordable rate. So that was a huge decision in going to a public school, because even if the PASHE system is the best deal, students are still struggling.
They're going into major debt.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the credit of the system, I think, that tuition has been frozen for the fourth straight year. So there is an effort there to keep costs down, but we also want to remember that tuition now is just a piece of what college costs are, because a lot of us remember like tuition was the big thing as far as the bill. Now it's about half of what the bill is, because when you take into account housing, all the fees that are attached to going to campus, it gets to be quite expensive.
Well, how has the cost of college affected your students, Ken?
Well, we got to see, especially like during the pandemic, students were, almost every one of them was working at the same time that they were attending. And that was true this year too, because now I went back and taught. We can applaud that, but we're not talking about like, when I was in college, I was working to make extra money to do things, to go out and have fun. They're working at this point to pay the bill or to keep down their debt. And, Pennsylvania is, one of the worst states when it comes to the amount of student debt that students have when they graduate.
As my mom used to say, we work to get our PIN money. Do you remember that saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really not the case. So Maddie, tell us a little bit. Are you working on campus or off campus, or how are you supplementing your beer money? I'm sorry, I didn't mean beer money.
Yeah, so I work on campus in the registrar's office, just to kind of offset the cost of college. Helps with books and supplies, because that is another extra cost that isn't taken into account with tuition. And on top of that, students work really hard if we have to take out student loans, we work really hard to kind of research what loan lender is going to be the best with interest rates. It took me months to figure out what loan lender would have the best interest rate, and I'm still going to end up paying $11,000 more than what my original loan amount was.
Oh,
so on top of working and on top of doing that extra research, it is kind of a huge issue for students.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the macro picture, like I said, Pennsylvania is consistently at the bottom of the states, ranking 47th, 48th, always near the bottom. And this money will help, and we will probably move up a state or two, but we are very far from even being at the median as far as the contribution of the state, and certainly with student debt.
Ken, you have brought an awareness to Harrisburg, and you did in your prior service. You brought an awareness to Harrisburg of the ranking of Pennsylvania in terms of spending for higher education. And you must be talking to the same people again about the same thing. What does it take to create an awareness? When will this finally sink in?
Well, you said I brought attention to it. Yes. I don't know how many people were paying attention at the time, but I do think that there is a growing awareness of the fact that more has to be done. And I think you could see that in a bipartisan way during this last cycle, where there really was support for the state system of higher education, and an understanding that the system is important to the Commonwealth for so many reasons, but it really is, we are the universities that serve the working class in Pennsylvania. And if our universities are not affordable, then there really is not an outlet for, the average person. So, we talk about it being, 22, 24 at that level, what it's going to be a year. And we're talking about a huge sum of money for the average person. And when you look at that debt that you might be accumulating, I can make a great argument, and I do make the argument regularly, that you will make it back, and it is an investment worth making. But when you're sitting around the kitchen table and looking at that mountain, it really does look like a mountain for the average family.
Bipartisan support.
Bipartisan support for this increase, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Charlie brought up campaign season at the very beginning of our segment here. What is APSCUF communicating with the gubernatorial candidates? Are you at all concerned about what next year's budget is going to have in it or not have in it?
Yeah.
What's happening?
Well, we're very worried about what's going to happen. We have a political action committee along with us. I'm not affiliated with it, but it's a separate entity. But the support has been for Josh Shapiro. And that support is really just based on what we know so far about his commitment to public higher education. And also, we are a union, and we're looking at what the candidates say about their support for unions, and in particular public sector unions.
I'm sure you don't want to lose ground again, so that's
Absolutely
very
not.
important to be involved in the gubernatorial race.
Well, the total amount, it's rumored that the total amount of outstanding student loan debt in America is now up to 1.7 trillion. What is that up from? How quickly has that risen, Ken? And is it going to continue to rise, or do we have a grip on that now?
Well, there's been a lot of talk in D.C. about doing something to alleviate the debt, and of course, during the pandemic,
There's
there
been
was
some
a
loan forgiveness,
moratorium on some of it, but nevertheless, it does continue to grow. And I think it's fair to say that the whole industry of student loans is broken and needs to be reformed. I know people who have been working at the university for 15 years, and they haven't hit the principal yet.
Oh.
Right? They're still paying off the interest on it, and at some point that's just absurd. And what we want to remember is it's not just about the individual. When you're talking about that sum of money, that's money that otherwise would be spent, right, on houses,
Into the
on
economy,
cars,
yeah.
right? And so that has a big effect on the economy itself, for business, that would suffer. And we see people putting off getting married, buying houses, simply because of the debt that they're carrying.
So, Maddie, this is a two-part question. What's the biggest thing you've learned working for APSCUF this summer, and what are you going to be when you grow up?
I would say the biggest thing that I've learned is to never stop pushing for something that you feel really strongly about. And I would say I'm really honored to have been involved with APSCUF, because it did, it taught me a lot more about unions and the impact that unions have. And really, there's a lot more behind the scenes with higher education that students don't even know. Some faculty may not even know. So APSCUF's work is really important. So it definitely has influenced what I think I want to do in the future. I've kind of pushed me towards education policy, so I'm hoping that I can get into that at some point, and maybe lobbying. I'm not sure yet. So
That's excellent.
You should talk about a trolley.
Yeah. I was
Looking
a
at
lobbyist
looking
one
at grad
point.
school?
Yeah.
I actually got accepted into the Masters of Public Administration program at Shippensburg, so I'm going to do that after graduation.
Oh,
That's
well,
excellent.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maddie, good luck in your career. We want to thank you very much for being with us today. And Ken, it was great to have you back.
It's great seeing both of you again.
Well, good luck in your new stint here in Harrisburg, and stay tuned for the next segment of Behind the Headlines, coming right up.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this segment of Behind the Headlines, Maura and I are welcoming Dave Sanko back to our program. Dave is the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Why, goodness, there is we're right in the middle of campaign season. I guess it seems like we're in the middle of it, but it's really just started, and there's certainly more to come. When you were with us last year, you predicted an early state budget. What happened to that, Dave? You didn't know that we'd hold you to your predictions.
I learned lesson learned. Even though there was record amounts of money on the table, the the leaders spent a lot of time trying to figure out what to spend it, or whether to spend it, or how to spend it, and just because you have money apparently doesn't fix all the problems. And maybe that's the real lesson that I hope came out of this, is that money is not the solution necessarily to all the questions. I know there'll be a lot more money in the rainy day fund for bad weather, and I would suggest that we are in or about to enter a monsoon. So I think for those who advocated putting the money aside for rainy day, that will be a little bit of benefit to Pennsylvanians. And at the same time, there was also record amounts of spending for some new projects. And budgets are always about priorities. So it's an opportunity for people to set their priorities and push back and forth.
Why were there record amounts of money to spend?
I think coming off of COVID, the tax revenues never really declined. Yet the federal government said, we think all the tax revenues are going to go down, so we're going to give away some extra federal money. I think they turned on the printing presses in Washington, made some more money, gave it out to everybody to replace what wasn't coming in, but it really did come in. So everybody had a ton of money.
There are a lot of COVID funding going on, even for individuals, but I think that a lot of people think that when there's a lot of money, the budget will pass on time, but it seems to take even longer to figure out how to spend it. Everybody wants a piece.
I think that's the case.
Yeah.
Sometimes the excess money is harder to figure out than when you have lean times, and because you know what you have to do. But it becomes a lot more challenging when you get to figure out or start fighting about what you want to do.
Well, how were local governments impacted by the budget? Did they fare okay?
I think as it relates to the state budget, local governments were largely unaffected because the state doesn't help the local governments anyway. It was good news for school districts, but local and counties got some additional human services funding. But by and large, local governments rely on property taxes and some liquid fuels money that comes from the state. So in reality, that was down a little bit just because of as fuel prices went up, people drove less, and cars are getting more efficient, so people are using less fuel.
Well, even though we have people in Washington trying to fight over the conventional definition of what is a recession these days, it appears that there are tough times ahead in the nation's economy. Dave, what do these current economic conditions mean to local governments in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think what it means initially right now is that with this record level of inflation, things just cost more. So they prepared budgets last year before any of this inflation really started to take off in huge numbers. So as an example, as the summer road project biddings came in, they were dramatically higher. The costs, all those projects involve petroleum-based products, blacktop, oil, much higher. So communities were all of a sudden faced with much larger expenditures to do the things that they were already planning on doing, and now they've got to make some tough choices. They either pave a little less, or they cut back on some other categories. It's not like Harrisburg and Washington, where you just make more money or borrow somebody else's.
Well, how does your organization help local governments prepare for times like these? I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that this was coming for a little bit, but how do you help?
Well, I think one of the things that the State Association does to help most is share information, share best practices, whether it's through our Township news publications, our morning daily newsletters, called the Morning News, which just won a national award, which we're very proud of.
Oh, congratulations!
And our own video news, our training department, our conferences. We're just kicking off regional forums. We're getting ready to start a series of budget classes. So it's really about making sure. And there are a lot of new people who are entering into local government. So it's about making sure the new folks don't have to learn the old mistakes over again. So it's helping them, educate them, share best practices as to what works, and how they can move forward to benefit their communities.
Well, most school districts in Pennsylvania, Dave, as you're well aware, are in the process of raising taxes. Are local governments going to follow their lead?
Well, I think this goes back to a little bit of something I said earlier. Maybe hopefully we're soon going to learn that money isn't the answer to all the problems. I mean, the school districts, Pennsylvania just made a record investment in schools. We're spending more. The state is spending more. School districts are spending more than has ever been spent before in the history of Pennsylvania. And I guess I'd ask yourselves and ask everybody to take a look at your kids and grandkids and or how they doing. And I will tell you, as I look at my grandkids, their money isn't the answer to our education system. So I think we saw that, and school districts had billions of dollars in reserves. They got more money from the state than they've ever got, and yet they still raised local property taxes, which leaves me kind of a little bit confused. But it leaves residents awfully angry about property taxes, and sadly they take a lot of the anger out on local governments and municipal governments, which are really your smallest portion of your tax burden to provide the services that we provide. So our guys are going to and gals are going to continue to do what they've always done. Try learn how to live with it, or live within their means. Make priority decisions about what's important for what a community needs. And it's not always about what you want, because it'd be nice to have everything. I mean, everybody wants to have a pony, but not everybody can afford one.
We have a theme here. Money is not the answer. Right? It's not the answer.
Very true.
Yeah.
It's hard to work without it, but it's really comes down to priorities and how you go about spending it.
So what are you as an organization expecting out of Harrisburg over the next the final quarter of this year?
Well, I mean, I would like to say that we're going to see mandate relief and open records reform and transportation funding and some solutions to the fire and EMS crisis, where we're struggling to find volunteers. But in reality, there's less than a dozen legislative days. So while hope is good to have, I'm not sure it's a great plan. So we'd like to see a lot of things. I mean, we're hopeful to get some of those solutions, but in reality, the budget is over, and local. We're also going to be quickly turning the corner and looking at next year's budgets.
Yeah, not too long. In December that starts.
Well, as the year goes forward, we find that the political environment everywhere just seems to be deteriorating. The political environment seems to be more hostile and more hostile as time goes by. Dave, how are local governments and your situation, especially townships, faring in this climate?
Well, the good news, I think, from a local government perspective, is that the partisan bickering has really doesn't make its way down to the local level, because the issues that local governments are dealing with, picking up trash and paving roads and making sure people have water, there's not really a Republican or Democrat way to do that. There's a right way and a wrong way, and they come together, and local governments, regardless of the partisan breakdowns on their board, very often act in unanimity because it's the right thing to do, and it's for the good of their community. We've spent some time over the last couple of years talking about some viruses and diseases that have taken the headlines, and I'm actually not talking about COVID. I'm talking about the partisan incivility, and that has been more infectious and more damaging to democracy and to our society moving forward as we move forward.
When they are working in unanimity, you mean some boards have actually found common sense?
Yes. Well, common sense is not as common as it used to be, and
unfortunately,
and sadly is a bad word in some circles, and it's just not to be discouraged. And we've got and this that's on the right and the left. I mean, there are fringes on both sides that are simply not willing to compromise and to get things done.
How did your big conference go this year?
It went very well. It was actually our most successful, and not our most well attended, but our most successful conference in terms of based on the evaluations. The workshops went great.
All back in person, which had to
Everything
be
was
good.
back in
Yeah.
person. We had, and as a result of not having had a couple conferences, we found that 1/3 of our attendees had never been to a conference before, so had never had that opportunity. So it was a tremendous opportunity for them for education, for networking, and for getting involved in the process that sets our resolution process, and for them to come to the understanding that each level of government has different responsibilities. And local government is charged with some things, state government is charged with some things, and the federal government is charged with some things. And our system works a whole lot better when everybody stays in their lane.
That's a good point.
Well, Dave, looking to the future, do you have an opportunity to work with school districts around the state to somehow get young people better informed about local government and maybe give them opportunities to come out and see local government in action? Is there that kind of interaction? Do you ever have the opportunity to do that?
Sure, there are some areas that's working really very well, and we have a youth program, a youth awards program that each year people participate with. We're launching into a scholarship program, but we've had some conversations with the Department of Education that have been on hold a little bit through this COVID thing, and we're hoping they come back to the offices soon. But where we're talking about trying to develop a portion of a curriculum, whether it's in a junior or senior in high school, where you can talk about civic engagement, where you can talk about local government, and helping them understand that because if you watch the news and read the newspapers, they know there's a federal government and they know there's a state government, and they don't know a whole lot about when you get below that to the governments that really have the most impact on your day-to-day lives, whether that's the county or the city or the borough or township. And that local decision making is far more impactful on every resident than what comes out of Washington.
And that is a good note to end on. Remember the importance of local government and the effect that it has on our lives. Dave, you're the best person to talk with that about. So we will see you again next week on Behind the Headlines. Tune in then.